The Research Left Behind with Professor Ashley.
Hello and welcome to The Research Left Behind, the only Twitch stream, YouTube show, and podcast, depending on your mode of access, which sweeps the cutting room floor to bring you the research that got left behind. My name is Professor Ashley, and yes, I am a real professor who teaches people how to make video games. And tonight I am joined by Dr. Mia Consalvo, author of many articles and books on the topic of game studies, player studies, and the culture of gameplay. But Streaming by the Rest of Us is the book that we are going to be discussing tonight. If you are watching the live stream, you can type !book into chat to get a link to order the book for your library or read it yourself for free, thanks to MIT Press's Open Access program. If you're watching or listening after the fact, please check the episode description for that link. Faculty, staff, and students, please join me in saying thank you to Dr. Consalvo for being on the show and telling us all about the research left behind in Streaming by the Rest of Us.
Thank you for having me here.
Sorry, I had to play I have an applause sound effect.
Oh, okay.
that I'm really intent on using for some reason. Oh boy. Okay, before we get started talking about the book, which I'm super excited to talk about, it's something near and dear to my heart. Micro streaming is something I've done for 7 years after all. But we have a segment of the show that we call our conflict of interest, which is a joke because we don't have an HR department. We don't have a research ethics department. It's just me and our mod, Chris. By the way, thank you, Chris. Yay. We love our Twitch mod. And chat, you can say hi to Chris. But the first question is a lore drop question, which is, do you remember how you and I met?
I am always bad at this question. I do remember meeting through Digra, or at least talking to you via Digra, and you wanting to set up some activities and things for graduate students at Digra. And wasn't there a Steam group that you helped set up? Was that one of them, or was it? That was before Discord, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, and it was with, I think it was also a Facebook group that is still going, ? But it was with Dr. Coert, who was our guest last week, right, and who is in chat right now.
Hey, Rachel. I was chatting with her earlier today, too.
Oh, that's amazing. This is what I'm saying. The reason why I like this segment is because I tell my grad students all the time that the games industry and games academia are both very, very small communities and everyone knows each other. So
yes,
be nice. The second question, also very difficult, is what you drinking?
I am currently drinking water from a mug that I made myself at pottery class.
Which is intense. That is so much better than the water I'm drinking out of a tumbler that I got for sale at the grocery store for $7.
Well, you don't see this mug does wobble a little bit, so I have to be careful with it.
You know what? It's off camera.
It's pretty, but it's not completely stable at the bottom.
If it's off camera, it doesn't count. It's the magic of television. Right. So let's get into the research left behind, Streaming by the Rest of Us. The book came out this year from MIT Press. It's pretty new release. And you must be incredibly proud of that because we all know, chatters, listeners, watchers, how difficult it is to get a book published. And getting a book published open access is even a bigger deal. So well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a little bit as we get started, because this is a question I ask all of my guests. Tell me about your writing process, because the book is co-authored. So I'm always curious, how do co-authors negotiate their authorship? Right? Do you do it by chapter, or you do the first draft, I'll do the second draft?
I think I've written several books and articles with lots of different folks now. And it varies a little bit, but with books, usually we all are doing research, maybe different parts, or, if we're all doing interviews, it's you take, this group of people and I'll take that group of people, based on schedules or whatever. But in terms of like the writing itself, with Mark and Andre, we sat down and talked about like what were the things that we each individually were most interested in and wanted to write about. And like Andre had been to TwitchCon, and so it kind of made sense for him to write, the chapter about that. But then also he was really interested in the analytics that Twitch uses, and so he said, I'll combine those two into a chapter. And Mark is really into podcasting. Actually, he and Andre do some separate games and comedy podcasts, or games and humor, I think. And so he's really interested because he's like the techie of all of us in like this idea of quality and like what does a quality stream mean. So it like made sense for him to think about this idea of quality and write that chapter. But basically, like we would all kind of, like write drafts, but then circulate them amongst each other and, like add things or remove things or suggest things. The one thing that made it a little difficult was at the time I was the supervisor of both of them. And I was like, you can critique my chapters. It's okay. And they're like, no, they're good how it is. And I'm like, they're not perfect. Right. So that was a little challenging, but it went pretty well, like in terms of like smoothness and divvying things up. I'm really happy with like how it turned out, and like they consistently, just did such an amazing job. It was just like a pleasure to work with them.
That's awesome. Did you use any kind of technology to ease co-authorship? Like, did you do live Google Docs, or was it?
Well, we were all in the same lab together at the time, so it was easy because we were all in Montreal, like we weren't working long distance, which I have done with other folks. And let's see, we had a shared Dropbox where we kept documents. So, like all of the interviews that we recorded, like those were there. And then the transcripts that we made. We have a bunch of spreadsheets that we had put together, like when we were initially watching different streamers, and then when we were doing interviews with folks, and then when we were doing like follow-ups, like after the fact. It's a huge snarly mess, the Dropbox, and I should probably go through it at some point because there's so much in there. It could be an archaeological dig, I think, at this point. But yeah, like that's kind of where everything sat so that we could, like all access stuff.
I think that's one of the things that impresses me the most about the book is how much data you all collected, because you've used this mixed methods approach, which is very rigorous and entirely appropriate for what you were studying. But the massive amounts of data, it feels, this is what, when students ask me, what's the difference between being an academic researcher or a games user researcher in the industry? I mean, besides the obvious and like the subject matter and the purpose of the research, my response is always that academics collect a swath of data, right? Like we want a really big chunk of data so that we can ensure that we're being rigorous and that we're getting repeatable results. Whereas in the industry, it's like, we got to ship this game in 2 weeks. So we have to be really directed. We have to be really tight. We need to just make sure that, I mean, yes, usability testing and academic research are very, very different. But the sheer amounts of data can make you feel like a dragon, I think.
It is really challenging, and especially, when we were all writing, like you could tell we would all sort of have to like burrow in, to our chapters and really kind of dig into like the questions that we were asking, and then the like the transcripts to see, because there was so much there, like how can you be sure that you are representing something fairly? Right. Yeah. And like, we also wanted to make sure that we weren't just going back to like the same 2 or 3 people who, were very eloquent, like in what they said, right. That we were being fair to folks. And also, for example, like people who had a hard time, like who are harassed on Twitch for different reasons. Obviously, women, people of color, queer folks had more of those things happen to them. Yeah. But like we talked about how we didn't just want their stories to be just about, like toxicity. So we wanted to make sure like their voices were represented in, like the other parts of the book as well. So it was like this constant balancing act. And then also you add in the fun of Twitch names, and we would go through stuff later and it's like, oh, I see we've used Black Oni, like we've spelled it or capitalized it differently in like, 3 different ways across 4 different chapters. So it's like a bit of a nightmare trying to keep all of that straight as well.
That's really funny. I'm gonna follow up on that because I have questions about your decision to use their real Twitch name, right? Not their government names, but using participants' real Twitch names is really cool in one capacity, because I am a deeply nosy person, as we have established. The whole purpose of starting this stream was so that I could get the inside scoop on things that got cut out of my favorite academic texts. But yeah, let's go back to that in a second. Right now I want to talk about Twitch and the history, or a brief history of Twitch. And y'all cite me in this, and Liz Moberly, who co-authored a chapter with me in Dr. Coert's book, because again, everyone knows each other. But one of the things that I didn't know about Twitch before I started streaming was that it got its start, obviously as Justin.tv, but it got its start in this reality television era. And so partially it was the Silicon Valley, let's see if what we can do with this technology and how we can compress videos to make it so that you could stream from your home. But Justin.tv was literally, what was his name? His name is Justin, but his surname is
I don't know
me.
His last name either. I think it was, to be honest,
Juan or Wong. Streamed himself, right? And one of the things that was super disheartening is that he reported, and this is on the Twitch blog, they're talking about like the fond halcyon days of yore. They're talking about the founding of Justin.tv, and they're like, within a couple days he was getting death threats, and he was getting pizzas sent to his house, and he was getting doxxed. And it's like, literally, the predecessor of Twitch was 48 hours old, and its creator was getting harassed, and yet that's still a problem. Anyway. Okay, so in your book, you talk about the novelty of Twitch being live, and that it's not really that novel because we've had live TV, Saturday Night Live being the one that comes to mind, but the news certainly also is live. Before that, theater, right? Most forms of entertainment were live. So the idea of Twitch being live and in real time isn't really that novel or unique. Nevertheless, there's this kind of appeal that people seem to have where they like watching things in real time. So why, even if it's not novel, why is it? What is the appeal of Twitch? What is the appeal of watching things happen live instead of pre-filmed?
So I think there's 2 things, especially with Twitch, but maybe some of it relates to liveness in general. And like we were thinking about this, especially in relation to like YouTube, like Let's Play videos, because that was like the closest analogy to people playing video games on Twitch. And that's the element of surprise in liveness, because you aren't really sure what's going to happen next. And with a YouTube video, that can easily be edited out. And I mean, obviously some people are known for their YouTube videos where crazy things happen, but it's like they're almost edited in, or, to make sure those things happen. But with like a live stream on Twitch, you're really not sure. And you add to that, like people who stream for like long periods of time, so they get very tired, very potentially emotional, or, there's just the added factor of you have a live audience with you. And so they can do anything, they can say anything, and they can interact with you as things are unfolding. And so, I think those are the elements that are important. It's kind of like why people also like to watch sports events live. I always like to watch, like the Olympics live. It's just, even if like there's a tape delay, it's not quite as meaningful to me. I've been watching the Tour de France live lately, even though it's just like, all these young guys riding bikes up mountains. But yeah, like, I think there's that element of the unpredictability of what's going to happen. And then with Twitch, the ability to, talk with the person themselves who is online, but also with other people who may be watching with you. Like I remember in the early days of Twitter, because I'm an old, like actually watching the Olympics live and tweeting about it, and my friends were doing the same thing from their house, and we would like, have like little mini conversations back and forth over Twitter about it, and like what was happening. People have viewing parties, where they watch shows and stuff. So, I think those ways that we want to connect together are kind of what make, Twitch so popular.
That makes total sense. I thought people watch the Olympics live for the injuries, but maybe that's just me.
Well, there's that too. There's the agony of defeat, like the what was it, ABC? They had the wide world of sports, and there was a guy crashing down the mountain, and that also happens in the Tour de France too. And there it's really dramatic because it's like 50 bikers can go down at once, if it really cascades.
Yeah. So yes, your reason was much better, and I am a bad person. So speaking of being a bad person and the institutional policies and procedures that are in place to prevent me from being a bad person, I served for a long time on the IRB, the Institutional Review Board at the University of Utah. And one of the battles that I face, that I'm sure you've also faced, is this perception that studying video games is totally harmless, especially if you're using things like screen names. That's not someone's government name, so why does it matter? And in one sense, on one hand, yes, this is true. We typically aren't doing the type of experimental research where we're injecting people with drugs, typically. But you had this scenario that you describe in great detail and very honestly and earnestly, which is one of my favorite things. I love it when people talk about their methods and about their research ethics in very blunt terms, because I think that helps us all be better and reflect on how we are ethical as researchers. So you described this scenario because you use streamers' Twitch names, not government names, but their names on Twitch, which was really awesome because I recognized some friends on that list. And some of the streamers that you studied were accused of sexual assault and harassment. And so you and your co-authors had to sit down and have this conversation about what to do with their data. And, one of the phrases that I didn't write down the exact quote was like, you can't just delete their interviews from your brain. You have learned from them, even if they are terrible people. The information's in your brain already. That's going to impact how you approach your research as you move forward. But you ultimately decided to deplatform them by taking out their data. Not mentioning them in the book. So can you talk about how that decision was made? Because I think it's a really great case study of an unanticipated event that comes out through researching our silly little games, which are not that silly.
This was something that we talked about a lot. And I guess partly it came about because it took so long to write the book that folks that we had interviewed early on, after we were done with the interviews, we were writing, but then COVID happened and that slowed things down. And it was like, I think shortly after that we, saw some things coming up in games journalism, but then also just across Twitter. Some things like, I think that got picked up later by Polygon and Kotaku as well. But basically, it was a couple of folks that we had interviewed and had watched, had been accused by different people. One of them, the one that's discussed in the introduction, I'm even blanking on his name now, but it was pretty well documented, the things that he had done. And he had sort of offered a non-apology. People weren't really sure how sincere he was. Something else happened later, like a year later, and then he just kind of disappeared from the world for a while. And I don't know that he's reappeared. Strangely, I was following his Discord server at the time, and it was this super active server, and I think he kind of gave up ownership of it and turned it over to his followers, and they've sort of renamed it, and they have their own space now, which was kind of one nice thing that came out of it. But the three of us were like, what do we do? You know, like, we can't unring this bell. We actually wrote a whole other chapter. What did we call it? We called it like an intermezzo or something like that. But the reviewers for the book at the press did not like it in the first draft. And so we tried to make changes and they still didn't like it. So we're like, okay, we're not going to use, you know, we don't want to like offend people with our thing that talks about, you know, like doing bad things. So we took it out. So yeah, that really did hit the cutting room floor. It didn't make it into the book. But we have this section of it that lives in the intro where we say, you know, like, we can't know for sure, really, you know, what happened, but we're gonna, you know, like, not use that interview data just because, you know, these have become tainted. And it led to a long discussion because, you know, we also said, I mean, these are honestly just the folks we've heard of, you know, that we happen to run across. And it could be that other people that we interviewed, and we asked folks when we interviewed them, like, what name do you want us to use? Like, we can use your Twitch name. We can make up a pseudonym for you. You can make up a pseudonym. I think we even said we can use your legal name. And like, everybody was like, use my Twitch name. Like, that's what I want. And so, you know, we said, like, it's entirely possible that some of these other people have done things, you know, that we just don't know about. And these are things that, like, researchers have to grapple with kind of going forward. Like, you don't want to cause harm, right? Like, with the research that you're doing, and, you know, like, present these people as like insightful and, you know, helpful, when in reality, maybe they did this terrible thing to somebody. You just, you know, we're just not omniscient. We don't know, you know, everything that's going on. And I think it's helpful to bring that forward and to have those conversations, you know, about, like, what is your approach? What are you doing to try and minimize, like, harm to folks? And, you know, like, yeah, like, how can you move forward and feel good about what you're doing?
Yeah. No, I mean, there are no easy answers. And I think, you know, that's part of the fun of being a researcher, is needing to think on your feet and negotiate very much in real time with your decisions, and trying to do what's best with the information that you have. And I really like how you point out that, I mean, I could be a monster. And you just don't know that. That's why I watch the Olympics. No, I do not like to see athletes get injured. I promise. But I have heard people say that that's why they watch the Olympics.
I mean, okay. You know, yeah, there's like the falls and like the car crashes, and yeah.
It's terrible. But I appreciate your frank discussion there. One of the other things I really enjoyed about the book is that you take this leisure studies perspective. And I feel like leisure studies is something that I forget. I forget about leisure studies. Really early on in game studies, leisure studies and game studies were much, much closer. I feel like we had a lot of folks working in leisure studies that came over into games and wrote this really insightful, wonderful stuff. And then me personally, I haven't made good use of leisure studies in quite a long time. So I was really excited when your book said, hey, you know what, mostly when people talk about Twitch, they use this economic perspective. That's great. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to use a leisure perspective. And here's why. So can you tell me about how that perspective was chosen, how you opted to take this leisure studies approach, and then also, you know, why was that a good fit?
So, well, first of all, I mean, we thought it was a good fit because we were studying smaller streamers who might be affiliate. I think there were a couple of folks who actually made partner that we talked with. But I mean, the focus of the book is really on small streamers. And so, you know, they're either an affiliate or they might not even be an affiliate. And so while they potentially made some money, I mean, it really wasn't their full-time job. And so, you know, while I think looking at, I mean, and as I write and as you know, I mean, streaming is a lot of work, definitely, but it's not the only way to understand what's going on the screen. And so, you know, we thought, especially, you know, for this group, just looking at it through the lens of labor doesn't really makes sense, for understanding what they do. And I had actually written a paper with Kelly Boudreau a while ago, looking at people who play Facebook games. And this is, again, I'm an old, but like, remember Farmville and games like that. And folks who would play with like their family members. Like we did some interviews with folks who would say like, I play with my aunt, or, like my cousin, or this or that. And they talked about it as a way to keep in touch, with family, and say things like, oh, like I'm long distance, and this is a way I can interact like with grandma, or, like this is somebody who I'm a cousin with, and like I'm not really going to call like my male cousin, teenage cousin, on the phone. Like that would be weird, but we can, like swap, things that we need in this game together, and it's like a way to kind of bond. And we were looking at like how to understand this, and found like this theory like from leisure studies of purposive leisure, which people have talked about it like, like as a family growing up, and like usually one of the parents says, we're going to do X activity, because we need to bond as a family. And it's questionable if anybody actually has fun at the activity, but you have to do it, because you're a family. And that's where like this idea of purposive leisure came from. And I talk a little bit about that in the book itself. Like there are some people who do purposive leisure streaming, but like that had given me the initial spark to think about like, oh, like leisure studies does have a lot to say. And like they look at folks who engage in hobbies, and can be very serious about those hobbies and spend hours doing them, not necessarily for money. And so that was kind of where that idea came from. And it just seemed to fit, like reading more and more of like serious leisure and casual leisure, like it kind of checked a lot of the boxes of what these smaller streamers were doing, and how they were engaging in the practice of streaming.
I love that so much, because it was such a light bulb moment for me where, yes, absolutely, this totally makes sense that it's leisure in the sense that it's mostly unpaid, but also it's being done with some intent, right? To make yourself better at the games you play, or better at streaming. So it was such a light bulb moment, and I really applaud you, Mark and Andre, on making good use of this literature.
Thank you. Yeah, and it was a fun literature to go into, and see others, another way of thinking about not just streaming but also games, and gameplay, and how people play games, and also like why they can stop, doing these things after a while because it no longer serves them, or they've gone on to something else, right?
Oh, we need to hit on that later, because that is something else that I'm obsessed with as someone who's been streaming for 7 years now. It's really fascinating. It's like, when do you call it quits? When does this no longer serve you? And I think that's a really interesting question. Kind of on that topic, there is a chapter on authenticity that I found really fascinating, because a lot of the research currently on social media talks about the presentation of self as this commodified thing. And you talk about that a bit in how streamers opted to, or not, brand themselves, how they trained moderators, how they engaged with chat, how they dealt with real life interruptions. They tried to have this brand strategy, to use another term. And the thing that impressed me the most about it is how there wasn't consistency, in the sense that there is no secret recipe, right? There's no, if you just do these 5 tips, you will be Twitch partner in a week. There was a lot of variance. So that chapter in particular, the book is very analytical and very critical and very wonderful, but that book is largely descriptive, and not prescriptive, as I think I wanted it to be as a Twitch streamer. But if I'm going to put you on the spot and say, if you had to give streamers advice on how to, we'll just say, interact with their chat, what would you say? Should they be their authentic selves? Should they put on a persona? Should they dress up like a pirate?
I don't think they need to dress up as a pirate. That didn't really seem to work for folks who were streaming. It's a
I
good
think it's a rite of
question.
passage, though, because I also have dressed up like a pirate to play Sea of Thieves.
I mean, I think everybody, it's like being a writer and finding your voice. You're gonna try on different things, and then it's like once you've been writing for a while, if you can equate that with streaming, it's like it doesn't even feel like anything that's put onto you necessarily. It's just, either it's some people would say it's who they are, but maybe it's just how they want to present themselves. And, for some folks that we talked to, that was very much like, I talk about the game and that's it. And I want my audience, like, they can talk about the game with me, but that's like what we talk about. We don't get into personal stuff. Whereas other folks were like, my chat is my family, right? And we talk all the time, and I know all the elements of their life and who's dating who and who just came out and, like who's breaking up and who got a new job and all of that. So it really, I mean, it sounds silly to say like people need to be who they are, but whether they were actively making a choice or not, they were making choices, and that seemed to be reflected in, like how they were presenting themselves. And if they started having an audience, then they also needed to make decisions about how they were going to react to their chat, their viewers, because people would ask them questions or people would say things to them and bring up maybe elements of themselves that they didn't really want to think about. For women, it was like, oh, this shirt that you're wearing, like, why are you wearing such a high cut shirt? Or why are you wearing such a low cut shirt? And they're like, why do I have to think about this? And because they had to deal with those things, then that became a part of like how they presented themselves on stream. It was like, okay, so I'm just going to angle my camera up as far up as possible so that I don't have to deal with this. But then that became part of like their stream. Or it became a very political decision. Like one Black woman said, like, I keep my camera on. I know I'm going to get lots of racist and sexist comments, but I want other Black women to see that a Black woman can stream, right? And to see me doing it. And she just had like lots of moderators who helped like ban people, and keep as much of the toxicity out as possible. And so for her, it really was about like presenting herself as part of the stream. And then for other folks, it was really about, just like, this is what I do. And I like to talk about the game. And I mean, people didn't, the folks who were really intent on like getting more viewers, I think they were maybe more attuned to kind of reacting to the audience. But the folks who were sort of doing it more for themselves, maybe had made a few of those decisions, but it was really more about like inside themselves, like what did either they want themselves to be like, or what did they want their stream to be like, right? I don't know if that made sense at all.
No, it totally does. It's like a constant negotiation of boundaries, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, because as much as you set up, like, this is who I am, somebody can show up and be like, why aren't you this? And then you're like, ugh, right? Like, or you can be like, oh, I'm glad you asked. Or you're like, I'm so sick of this question.
Yeah, it kind of, this is where I see a lot of parallels with teaching, being a university professor, in the sense that you have, you have this idea of what to anticipate for the semester, and you have an idea of what students are going to ask in your class. But occasionally you get a student who asks, what's your political beliefs? And you're like, oh boy, that's a fun question. Will I get deported? That's a fun thing to consider.
Or they're like, you're so scary. And you're like, I'm not scary at all. Right? And you're like,
is it my face?
I am scary. Yeah.
It's definitely my face, right? Oh. So let's talk about something else super controversial. So speaking of difficult questions that you might be asked on Twitch, let's talk about money.
Yes.
Money, talking about salaries is a really taboo topic in at least North America, possibly other cultures as well, right? But most streams my size or smaller run at a loss, and this is just brushed over. And partially in your book, you talk about how it's largely kind of, because of people's discomfort in talking about money, or people feel like awkward about bringing it up, or right. So I'm usually very blunt and very frank when I talk about, this stream costs. I could give you exact figures, but I will say I've never made a profit on Twitch because with your, buying the equipment and obviously paying for internet, but even beyond that, buying books for the stream, paying our lovely moderator, all those things cost money, and I'll never recoup those costs. But there's this idea that like the shame comes in, partially because people don't want to feel like they're begging for tips or asking for money, but also because there's an idea that for leisure pursuits and for things like games and Twitch, that you should be willing to do it because you're passionate. I mean, this is academia too, right? Like academia expects us to take almost no money, like a third of what we would make in the private sector, because we're just so darn passionate. So I was wondering if you had any insight into where this attitude originates. Is it a failure to appreciate the arts and artists? Is this the same thing we see when people get cross about having to spend money and actually buy a game? Or is this something just different and has more to deal with performers?
There is so much going on here. Yeah. And I was just talking with Mark and Andre about, we want to write a piece for the conversation about the book. And I said, like, our in is about tips, because especially since the pandemic, like there's been this conversation lately about tips, and, like you go to the restaurant and you're just getting takeout, and like they swivel the screen around and there's a tip option, or, you go anywhere and there's a tip option and people are like, this is ridiculous. And they keep upping the percentages offered for the tip. Like it's no longer 10, 15, and 20. It's like 20, 25, and 30%. And, people are like, why can't I just pay people, like what the job is worth? And some restaurants actually have tried doing that and they fail. So there's something complicated going on. But yeah, like tipping has always been controversial, like we say in the book. And it just is this weird thing where, because there's no set figure, like how much do you tip? Like who do you tip? When do you tip them? I mean, at least with a server at a restaurant, you kind of know when, at the end of the meal, and there's like, it's sort of added in. But think about, a hairdresser, or like somebody helping you with your bag at like a hotel, or then like you go to Europe and the rules completely change for tips. So there's all this confusion. And then there's also the whole psychology behind money, and the idea that, you should be doing some things because you love them, not because, you're just doing it for the money. And, or that, if you're really successful, like if you're really good at something, that means you're really successful and you're making a lot of money, and you don't want to admit that you're not, because that somehow means that you're a failure, even if maybe you really enjoy doing the thing and, you don't care about making money. Like I can make these little cups and never sell them, right? And that's okay. So you've got all that swirling around, and then you have Twitch sort of telling, streamers, oh, like you can become really famous and you can monetize this, love you have of playing video games, and, like make money from it. It can be a side hustle. Maybe it could even be your day job if you're good enough. And look at these super famous people making all this money. And like they push this through the platforms, and the way that they've set up, like these like categories. You can become an affiliate, and you can become a partner, and you can get sponsorships, and then there's bits and cheers, right? And so they build in all these things, but then they leave it up to you as the individual streamer, with no training or knowledge of like how to do those things. And, like, how do you ask people for money? Like, when was the last time you were at a party and somebody was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what do you do? Oh, how much money do you make? What's your salary? Right? Like, like that would be like asking, I don't know, like, did you poop today? Right? Like, it's just like those are the categories of things you do not ask people about. And so there's all this, horrible psychological discomfort, but then people are like, well, I'd like to be able to pay for the video games that I buy and play on the stream. And like we even found as researchers, we were uncomfortable asking people about like how much money they made on their stream. And, so all of this just gets bundled up and folks rely on these little patterns that they see other people do, like, oh, like tips are welcome but not necessary, or they offload it onto their page, or like a little like a bot that's like, if you like this, you can share. If you don't, that's okay. And one of the people that we interviewed, he was actually one of the couple who was a partner. He talked about how once you start talking about money and taking money from people, it becomes like this contract, and so people start expecting more.
Yep.
And so that's when, like things can get kind of icky. And I would also say, I mean, like part of this is tied to being a performer. Like musicians have gone through the same thing. Think about, like also like when somebody becomes really big, they're not quite seen as authentic and real as a small indie band where it's okay to support them because they're cool versus, once they're, like huge, they're sellouts. But also because these are on screens, anything that's digital is like we sort of expect it now to be free, and maybe we'll pay a little extra if we think it's okay, but yeah, like it's on a screen, so it's got to be free.
Yep. Yeah, I actually just saw a TikTok video from this movie director who just launched his movie, and he himself uploaded the MP4 as a free download to pirating websites, and then just put a little clip that was like, yo-ho, I wish I could remember this guy's name. I should have saved the video. I was like half asleep scrolling. But he put in a little like, yo-ho, you pirated this. I get that. If you enjoy the movie at the end, could you throw a few bucks my way? Here's the link. And people were like, that he's probably going to be wildly successful with that, because a lot of people pirate now, not because they don't want to spend $3 or $4 on a movie, but because they don't want to subscribe to 10 different streaming services. And I was like, well, I mean, it's a strategy. Let's see how it works.
Right. I mean, that's why musicians tour so much now. I mean, that's how they make their money, because, they can't sell albums like they used to. So yeah, like they have to figure out another way to make the money. And also, they have to figure out how to market themselves at the same time. Like that used to be offloaded onto other people, like as part of a record label, right? For good or bad, whether they did a good job or not is another story. But it used to be that, like the artist was the one who made the music, potentially, and then there were like the promotion and marketing people. Whereas now you were a one-person band, like especially if you're on Twitch, you have your own channel, but you're like, you decide the content. You decide your streaming schedule. You decide, like how you're gonna like set up your graphics. You decide who you're gonna like let in and how you're gonna talk to people, right? Like there's all these decisions that are you, right?
Yep.
And yeah.
On the topic of success and what makes for a successful stream, this is actually a lot more complicated than I initially thought. So you looked at a bunch of variables. It was like an onion of variables that just kept getting more and more complex. So the first is the obvious one, right? Like you need to have clear audio and clear video and like a good bit rate in order for the stream to be watchable. But you said that didn't actually equate necessarily to higher viewers. There were people who had 1,000 people watching with really bad audio quality that was annoying or difficult to listen to, and vice versa. There were people with these immaculate, beautiful streams that had only a handful of viewers. So could you say a little bit more about that, the relationship between viewers and having, a good, technically good stream?
Right. Yeah, the chapter on quality was super fun because we watched like the release day videos or Twitch streams, for a couple games. like big budget games to see, like who was streaming it, how they were doing, and to look at streamers who were like the most watched streamers, and then like some mid tier, and then a few, like to, like single digit that had single digit views, to see like, is there any, like, is it true that, like the cream rises to the top, that like it is really the best of the best that is getting the good views or all the views. And yeah, the spoiler was no. There were plenty of people who had great audio and video, had pretty good, like interactions, like they played the game well. And, they had some viewers and they were chatting with them. And like, as you got down to the lower side, that was where you saw like, there were people who were less good at the game, but they may have had really good audio and video. Maybe they had like the pirate hat, that kind of thing. But it really showed that, it's not the meritocracy that, like Twitch would have you believe, that like some of the largest viewers had like lots of, well, they had years of experience. They had prior like jobs. Like one of them was a professional video game reviewer before he became a Twitch streamer. They also turned out had early access to the games, so they'd gotten them like a day or two before, and you could see like as they were going through, they were clearly like very familiar like with the menus and the interfaces and all of that. So, like somebody who's like trying to watch a stream to see like, should I buy Sea of Thieves or not? Was like, oh, okay, like this person is going through and systematically showing me, like what are the features, what are the, like the strong points, what are the weak points. But, like they also had the luck in terms of they were probably around at the beginning of Twitch, or, like at the right time where they kind of blew up. And then like once people develop an audience, it's like trying to compete. Like back in the day when Oprah was a thing on TV, it's like you can't create a talk show that's going to compete with Oprah, because people watch Oprah because they want to see Oprah, right? Or like insert the name of whatever famous person it is. And it's like that a lot with streams. It's like it doesn't really matter necessarily what the game is. They want to watch that person because they want to watch that person playing the games. And so yeah, like the people at the bottom, maybe they're having a harder time, but they can also have a really good stream. It's just they're not that person, right? Like they started too late. They, or they're streaming the wrong game, or they're streaming at the same time as, somebody who's really successful, right? So it's this, vicious circle problem.
I was really surprised when you talked about having early access. So, I mean, obviously I knew that games send out press packs to journalists to review. I know that I can show you my inbox. I get a load of game Steam keys. But I guess I was really naive in that I didn't anticipate that streamers would practice offline before playing them. But they do. They rehearse their streams.
Well, you gotta make product, right? You gotta make gameplay. And if you are a partner and this is your job, I mean, it's your job. So you're gonna, it's just like an actor is gonna rehearse beforehand. You're not gonna, if you're a professional streamer, like you're not gonna go online, blind as it were, unless that's part of your thing, right? Like if you're playing a game with lots of choices, and, and you're like, this is first playthrough, and I'm going in without, and maybe you still do, you just don't tell people that you're doing that. How do you really know?
Yeah. We're lucky that we rehearsed this beforehand for hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So people, they would like rehearse, or, they got it a day or two before. And so they could actually start streaming, the day before. And they also, like you were saying, like you get keys, some people even just get keys, so they don't have to pay $60, $80, right? Which, if you're self-funding your stream, you've got a limited amount of money that you can, how many new releases are you gonna, get day one?
Yep. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about your experience as a seasoned behind the scenes in front of the camera celebrity newscaster, news anchor. I loved the autoethnography. I was absolutely floored when I got to that chapter, and I'm like, and there's more? You did more research? This is so intense. But it makes total sense for the project, and it really adds to the academic rigor of the work to have that experience yourself, hence the autoethnography, to do a Twitch stream. And I think unless you have done a Twitch stream, you really don't appreciate just how much work it truly is, she says while laughing and crying at the same time. So you said from November 2017 until January 2018, you streamed, and despite your theater background, you reported struggling with the tech aspects of streaming. So I wondered if the book gives a sense of the frustration, right? Because you talk about how, oh, I just got this thing working, and then damn it, there's a patch, and now none of it works, which is so relatable. Mm-hmm. It happens to me literally all the time. But I wondered if you had any other frustrations or any other fun stories about dealing with the nightmare that is trying to stream, especially since you've at least started trying to stream on Mac.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. And I'm doing this on a Mac. I have not learned my lesson. Because I like Macs.
There was one line when you were like, I just went out and bought a top-end Alienware, and that made me die.
I mean, that was because I had a research chair, so I could do that. Yes, not everyone can do that. And even that didn't solve the problems.
Yeah.
But no, it was so frustrating. It was like playing, like whack-a-mole, with technology. And, like I write about, because so many of these technologies are free, going back to this whole, it's digital, it has to be free. It means like, that's about what it's worth sometimes. And especially like these little helper apps, because you're like, oh my God, like none of this works. Or I've got like 4 things kludged together and I guess they all interact badly. So it's like, oh, okay, well, I got this working, but now that doesn't work. Or, it's all working, but I'm down to like 3 frames per minute or something. So it's more like a still life than it is a video. And like, I think I managed to get a few streams on, but as it turned out, the audio for the game never translated, which was fine because there was just kind of background music in the game I was playing. But yeah, it was so weird. And I only had a few people watching, and they were people I knew, thank God. Which is like, I'm used to theater and there's an audience, and like, yes, like it's true in theater, the show must go on. And like, I've done the thing where I have tripped and almost fallen on stage when I was performing, and you just have to like smile and keep going, or, like something falls apart in front of you when you're performing. And my big problem was just like getting things working enough to get online in the first place. And so, I think just more people do it on PC or something, because I just could not get the Mac to work properly. And every once in a while, like I still try, like with my Mac now, I'm like, I wonder if this will work. And it still doesn't. I'm like, no. And we all thought we would be stars. We all nursed that secret desire, that, oh, well, maybe, we'll be the breakaway person. And no, we were not.
Yeah, that was the part, I think it was Mark's autoethnographic account of, like, I studied this, I can min-max, I'm going to make money.
Yeah.
And then the humility train kind of hits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like Andre was sick, he made himself sick for streaming so many hours in a row. And Mark tried to do it in the lab, and like didn't, couldn't be alone and couldn't control the space, and like I could barely get on the stream at all. And so it was totally humbling. And it just gave us this real appreciation for how hard this is. And also it was helpful then when we talked with streamers and we mentioned it, and they were just like, oh yeah, like it is, and they could at least understand that like we tried. We were like the little baby streamers who they were like, oh, that's so cute, right? Like you, yeah, you do you, right? Like good luck. But I would love for you to write a book about your streaming as a successful streamer and talk about the process.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, I think that strikes the exact right tone, and that's what you need to do to be a successful social scientist engaging in fieldwork, though. So I love that example so much, and it's very humanizing as well. Andre, I couldn't believe, was playing Path of Exile on stream. I'm like, you could not pay me enough. Like, for free? You did that for free?
It's what he enjoys, you know?
God bless. That is amazing. And I did have a chance to meet him, actually, at Decrest, so.
Good.
I mean, virtually, but still.
Yes, he's awesome.
He is awesome. So we have a penultimate question. So chat, if you have questions for Dr. Consalvo, get them in chat now. We have 2 questions left and almost no time left. But let's almost end. The second to last question on how much this book offers streamers in terms of the book's premise isn't how to get rich quick while streaming, right? That's not in the title. Right. It's on the cover. It's an academic text. It's not really intended to do any of those things. But I walked away from the book with actually quite a lot of insight on, maybe I should. It kind of gave me a bit of a crisis about my stream of like, have I done this? Have I thought about this? Like, interesting. So I think a lot of our viewers here and a lot of the viewers and listeners after the fact are going to be Twitch streamers themselves. So if you had to boil down all the research, all the data, all the insights you got from interviewing people, from Twitch streaming yourself into, concrete little pieces of wisdom, bite-sized pieces of wisdom for Twitch streamers who want to be successful, what would you say?
Well, first you need to define what you mean by success. Not you, Ashley, but like the streamers, because it can mean lots of different things for different folks. And that you are part of a long line of people who have wanted to do this. And I don't mean on Twitch. I mean, like, there was, like talk shows on early radio, and there was public access TV and cable access television, right? And because folks wanted to, yes, there were businesses that wanted to make money, but there were folks who wanted to connect with other people and share some interest that they had in a hobby, and maybe it was cooking, or maybe it was like the state of their neighborhood housing, whatever it was. Like, people just like want to share these things and find other people who care about them. And that is like a constant throughout history. And so I think, like, one of the most interesting things is that Twitch streamers are the latest, instance of that. They want to, do something that they enjoy doing and find other people to, who share that interest. And so, it's about what is it that, like, you as a streamer really want to do, and who do you want to share it with? But also, like, I think it's the knowledge that, there are other people interested in this who aren't just in it for the money, right? And that they do have all of these, like, challenges and issues, and that's okay. And it's okay not to be, a huge megastar, and people are happy doing that, with a small audience. And it's also okay to stop, if you need to or you want to, right? And maybe you'll come back to it later, maybe you won't. But, like, do it in the now and enjoy it in the now, if it brings you joy, right? Because that's the important thing, is because the world sucks enough. You need to do the things that bring you joy.
Amen. Hear, hear. I will toast you with my $7 tumbler. With your very nice ceramic teacup. So the last question that I have, and Chris, I don't think I saw any questions in chat, but if there were, could you copy and paste them while I'm asking this question? Tell me about the research that got left behind in streaming by the rest of us. What did you have to cut for length? Did you go down any research rabbit holes that didn't make it in? We talked about a deleted chapter previously, but beyond that, is there anything else that got left behind?
Let's see. We got a lot in there. I mean, there were more great quotes from people that we just didn't have room. I mean, we've got some big chapters in that book. So, we stuffed them as full as possible. We did a follow-up survey with folks to see who was streaming. And we didn't get to talk about it as much as because we just kind of ran out of steam at the end, and we're like, okay, like we have to stop. We have to finish and get this book done.
Yep.
And so like there's a little bit of longitudinal stuff in there, but I think we did want more, but we just couldn't do that. And we got quite a few pictures in, but I still would have liked more pictures because more pictures are always cool.
I recently had a meeting with an editor who sat me down and was like, you're limited on pictures. And I was like,
yeah, there is that too. The press that's like, yeah, no, you can't have, 55 pictures in your book.
Which, I didn't have any. So I was like, well, I didn't really, but then my co-authors had a lot and I was like, oh,
yeah,
I was not the intended audience. I'm boring. Okay.
And it is something you can potentially negotiate with the publisher ahead of time if you are actually organized enough to do that. I mean, they won't necessarily give you all that you want, but you can bargain for more in the beginning if you really want them.
That is really solid advice for people who are working with the publisher for the first time, because those negotiations are tough if you've not done them before.
Yeah, and you don't think about pictures, right? Like we didn't. I never think of how many pictures I'll need. You just sort of think oh, I'll do as many as I want. And then they're like, yeah, go back and read your contract. You're like, oh, yeah. I get 10 or whatever it is.
Exactly. So we are at time. We're actually 5 minutes over, unfortunately. I'm so sorry about that. So it is definitely time to say goodbye, especially since it's late. So stream, please join me in saying thank you once again to Dr. Consalvo for her patience, for her time, for her book. And Mia, did you have anything that you wanted to plug? Any new publications or?
We don't. I don't have any more books coming out soon, but I have two awesome research teams working on games. One is called Measure Up, and it's about women in fashion. And the other one is called, you'll like this, Stream Evil. And it's about tandem play and what happens when a player who normally loves to play the hero in games, who is streaming that game, has an audience that's encouraging them to play the evil side, and how do you react and why? So that should be out later this year.
That's amazing. I will get links from you and we'll put them in the description for the pod and the VOD, because that sounds like Perfect. Literally both of those games right up my alley. Where can listeners find you on social media or otherwise?
Let's see, my website, miaconsalvo.com, and I think Instagram, mconsalvo. That's the main one.
Awesome.
No more Twitter, no more X. Yep.
I know, isn't it liberating?
Yes.
All right, well, I have a long list of people to thank. Thank you so much again to Dr. Consalvo. Thank you to Shawn, Pierre, and Adrianna Poindexter for the creation and use of our theme song. To Nifty Chris, the Twitch mod, for the classroom management. And to you, the viewers and listeners. Without you, this production would not be possible. I guess what we learned today is that it technically would be possible. It would just suck. Listeners, viewers, chatters, if you like this stream, this VOD, this podcast, now I'm hyper aware that I'm doing the thing that we just talked about. People are really uncomfortable doing. Make sure you are following with notifications on so that you know when we'll be live again and when the next recording goes up. If you are listening after the fact, head on over to twitch.tv/professor_Ashley to follow so you can catch the next stream live. You can also find me almost anywhere on social media. as Professor_Ashley. The Research Left Behind will be live next week once again. So we did 3 weeks in a row, which is kind of a fun little sprint, but hey, DGRA happened. So we'll be live again on July 24th with Dr. Catherine Coles and her dissertation From Jane Austen to Meghan Markle, The Persistence of British Imperialism in White Popular Feminism. This is an amazing stream. I'm super excited. I'm reading through a dissertation now, and it's wonderful. And one of the goals of the stream, besides, because we're not going to make bank here, but I want to use my platform to platform grad students and the amazing work that they're doing. And I have a niche interest in romance novels, as you all know. So I'm very excited for this next stream. Good night, everyone. I will see you on July 24th. And thank you again to Dr. Consalvo.